Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Doctors of Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, discuss the art and science of running and the stuff that we put on our feet. Today at the round table, we have Dr. Matthew Klein, the founder of Doctors of Running, Dr. David Salas, senior contributor, and then myself, Nathan Brown. And we're pumped to be together. We always appreciate the times to reconnect on Sunday nights throughout the month. And we actually have a jam-packed show tonight. Yeah. We don't know how much of it we're actually going to get through, but we have some major topics. We're going to be talking about some new super shoes that are coming out on the market very, very soon. If not, by the time this release, they may also be out, or at least information will be out there in the world, obviously. The second thing is we're going to go into the topic of should we be training in super shoes, and really, what are the considerations we should make when we do train in super shoes, or if we do, or should we? And we are going to be using a recent study that came out from somebody who reached out to us with their research that they had just done. And so we're going to talk about the findings of that study and some of the considerations that it brings to the table. Finally, if we have time, we're going to go into talking about calf strains and all of the different types of calf strains that might exist, and maybe some considerations for how you can progress through your rehab. So jam-packed show. We'll see what we get through. But first, we're going to start with our subjective, which has nothing to do with any of these. And it's just actually something I'm curious about from you both. Uh-oh. We get to test a lot of different things, footwear, apparel, all this stuff.
I don't know why I was ready for an NBA question.
It's not about Giannis.
I had a weird feeling it was going to be an NBA question. Okay,
not about the NBA.
If the issue was a basketball team, and I sit there awkwardly in the corner like the OG episodes, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm just curious, and it's kind of a two-pronged question. We get a lot of stuff for free, so we don't take the hit on the financial side of these things.
Yeah.
So if you were getting clothes for free, what brand of running clothes would you buy? Would it be one of these running specific brands, or would you go for a generic one? But if you are, and then the second prong is like, if you were going to buy a running specific brand, which brand, if you had to be exclusive, would you do? So you can also answer that for clothes, and it can be, clothes of any kind. So you got to pick one, kind of be exclusive with it.
You're talking like lifestyle.
Yeah.
Oh, no. For running. For running
only.
Yes.
So no crossing over.
Yeah.
No. Just for running. Yeah.
Can I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
So we have gotten some free stuff from them, but I'm going to be honest, I'd probably do what I'm doing right now, which is going to ruin this because not everybody might do this. I hunt on eBay for discounted on stuff because I love their apparel so much, but it's so freaking expensive that I don't think I have bought a single piece of it for full price just because, we do get
T-shirts,
stuff for
$80.
free. Yeah, so I will go and find it for like $30-40 on eBay. So because I love their stuff so much. It's so comfortable. It's so light. Even some of their super light jackets, which are like $300, and I've gotten a couple of them for like $50. They keep you really warm. So I would say, yes, I'd probably keep doing what I'm doing right now, which is hunting stuff on eBay. But if I had to choose one company to just have clothes, not necessarily shoes, I'd probably have to pick On.
Cool.
To be honest.
David, what's your answer? Or do you want me to go?
No, I can go. Man, that is so tough. So On does make some good stuff. And if you are on a budget, keep a lookout every once in a while, because when the season ends, they'll do kind of a clear out sale on their own website, and they'll have things 50% off. And so I've actually bought I've bought a few things. At 50% off. I mean, obviously you don't really get your choice in colorway all the time, but if you're looking to just get things, you could do it that way, and it's pretty affordable. When it's 50% off.
Yeah.
This is tough. And I think I'm actually going to choose Rabbit. And the reason why I'm going to choose Rabbit over On, I love the On apparel.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the running exclusive category, you have to take into consideration as well the fit of everything. Mm-hmm. And On makes really good tops. And the short sleeve, the singlet, the long sleeve, there are some of my favorite tops, period. They might even be my favorite. But their shorts, I feel need a little bit of work, at least for me, of what I like. And I feel the Rabbit has a more complete profile between the tops, the shorts, the jackets, the long sleeves, and their performance wear is very close to On as far as lightness, the synthetic feel. Like I feel like they're pretty interchangeable there. Like I feel like I might give the nod to on the tops, but I think as far as the overall package, I'm gonna have to go Rabbit. That's not a Santa Barbara bias. That's
I was gonna say you just chose that because
no, I mean they're headquartered here, but that's a genuine nod here. If I had to truly choose one company for strictly apparel, I think I probably would go with them.
Rabbit.
To be fair, if it was for everything, by the way, I would definitely choose Rabbit. All my students know that I wear those like really nice Rabbit high country long sleeve tops every time in class. That is my pretty much only wardrobe for teaching and treating. So
if I got to go everything,
Rabbit.
Rabbit. No, I think I might actually go Lulu. No, I mean the short sleeve I'll do full workouts in it and everything, and it's great. I have half tights from them. Like they make good stuff even for like running. And it can cross over on a lot of stuff.
Nice. Nathan, I'm very curious to hear your answer because you actually got some unique expertise on apparel testing too.
Why do I have our expertise?
Yeah,
what do you mean?
Because you got to do some additional apparel testing.
So. Oh, that's true. I got to test for a magazine, so I tested a lot of other stuff. But I'll be totally honest. Actually, I'm wearing one of the things from that right now.
Yeah.
The stuff that they send is like literally a $270 t-shirt, which is just completely not okay for me. I just like would never do that. So that was my review. I like you had to write like what your recommendations were, and that was like not even
would not buy
consideration. I'm like I can't throw that out there. Anyway, just literally, and I'm not exaggerating. It was $270 t-shirt.
Yep.
Crazy. Anyway, I'll be honest. If I wasn't in this, I would definitely be buying from like Target or Old Navy. I would just be getting their stuff or just like budget shopping from, other places.
What was the original question? I am so
sorry. Which brand, if you had to run it exclusively?
Yeah, picking an exclusive brand, would you actually do a running specific brand or like be outside of that and just get, like I said, like I would go to Target and just...
But this is something you're not purchasing or you are purchasing?
You are purchasing.
You are purchasing.
Are purchasing. Okay, see, I didn't hear that part.
Okay.
So I apologize.
That's okay.
I think I might change my answer because Rabbit can be a little pricey.
Well, so I'll finish mine quick and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Because I've seen these different tiers. What I'm not a fan of is when you have to pay $20 more for something that doesn't feel $20 better. I think that Rabbit legitimately feels better than the stuff that I've worn from Target or Old Navy.
Yeah.
It just performs better than that. Yeah. And so I do think that their price point actually matches their longevity I think the benefit that I've seen from Rabbit is I've had their tights for winter for 5 years and have seen no wear in them at all.
They do last.
They just have been awesome. Yeah. And I think, and they're easy care. It's wash, machine wash, cold, tumble dry, low, don't bleach. Okay. That's their stuff on their website. And I just love how simple that is. And so for me, if I was going to be dipping into that mark, like I would buy discounted Rabbit stuff. That would be my company as well. Just, I think that they're, I don't know. It's just where I would go. But you said you'd change your answer though, David?
Yeah, I think what I would do is I would go to one of the big players that have discounted retail markets. And so that would probably be Nike or Adidas, most likely.
Sure.
And I also grew up inland. So there are outlet malls, in the desert and things like that. I could very easily make a 20-minute drive and go and spend $100 and have 4 pieces of apparel or more. Like that was a very realistic thing that you could do. But, I mean, obviously there's inflation and things things cost more now, but I could get a good chunk of stuff, for a good chunk of value and they would still last pretty well. Yeah. So you go to the Nike Miler singlet, whatever, and they're all $15 or, stuff like that.
The Nike 2-inch short was like my go-to jam for many years. Yeah. So they're like $30 and then on sale, they're like 10, 15. And so I'd grab tons of those when I could find them on sale. So I totally get that.
But I get the Target thing too, because I grew up on the Target shorts. So those are indestructible when they came out. Yeah. But they've changed.
They're indestructible, but they will also destruct parts of your anatomy if you chafe the wrong way, which is why when I started working and running retail, I still remember like finally understanding, I remember buying a pair of Brooks running shorts I'd worn, I think it was a pair of Target like shorts that had like the really high liner, and the liners were so uncomfortable. I'd always cut them out. I never understood what they were for. I was like, this sucks. Like, why would I wear this? And this was like, you should try a pair of like actual running shorts. Like, no offense to the Target stuff. And so I bought a pair of Brooks after severely chafing myself on a 10-mile. Yeah, I think it might have been actually. I chafed myself badly that morning, and I was like, I have to get my second run in. So I bought a pair and went for another 5-mile run. It was just smooth, and I was like, I didn't feel any pain. Wow. That's like, cool. I guess this is a thing.
I will say Mizuno has really good pricing on apparel too.
That's true.
So if you had to go out of pocket and go and purchase, like you could get those full price retail and still have a good value on your money as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I anticipated that taking 2 minutes, and we're 10 minutes into the episode. So anybody who doesn't care about apparel, I am so sorry, but apparently we can talk to a wall about anything. So let's transition now. But first, if you do want to talk about your favorite apparel, I don't know, I was just curious. So if you do want to talk about it, let us know below what you like, and maybe we'll test it out. But I am very sorry that took 11 minutes to everybody. So what we're going to do next is we're going to start transitioning to a global conversation about training in super shoes. But before that, we will have a lot of in-depth reviews about these shoes. At the time of this release, there will be some videos on YouTube, and our written will be coming out soon if it isn't already there. And it's on the recent drop of the updated Metaspeed Sky and Edge Paris. We got both models in for testing, and all of us have been able to get some time on the shoes. Don't be fooled. They look very similar, but there are distinct differences that we'll go into in the reviews. But the point of talking about it now on the podcast is just because us three haven't been able to really talk about it, and we just want to give our initial impressions to trying these shoes out. So I'll go first just to get myself out of the way. I have one run in each of them, so super preliminary thoughts. The first Metaspeed Sky I could not handle because the way that the foam compressed, I felt like I was climbing out of a negative drop. I've had that experience in a couple different shoes, and it just felt clunky. Like I never could get in rhythm. The only way I could get in rhythm is if I really was running fast, and it was faster than like pretty much any race pace for me where it started to feel good. So I just couldn't run in it. And I would say that this experience is completely new. They have a new foam compound. We got to meet with their team the other day. We talked with a couple people from the ASICS team, and they talked about it's a full PIBA blend. So it's completely PIBA based foam and so much lighter. And I would say it just feels different. Like it's a very different feel underfoot. The Metaspeed Sky for me, I don't feel like I'm climbing out of it anymore. But I still felt like on that run, I didn't really get into rhythm until I was going faster. Whereas in the Edge, I switched it halfway through my run just to compare them as well. And I put on the Edge and I was like, ooh, at slower paces, this is really pushing me forward, really smooth and fun. And I just felt like this, I'm in rhythm like right away, where I didn't feel that with the Sky. And we'll talk more, but there's different geometries of how aggressive the forefoot rocker is and at what point it starts. And I just found myself really enjoying the Edge, at least at those more controlled paces. But what was y'all's experience like? David, do you want to go next?
Sure, mine was the opposite.
No way.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I believe that.
Yes,
I believe that 100%.
Yes. Chaos is what the people want.
They're both nice. They're both really nice.
I agree.
Actually, like you want to look at like top shelf shoes. Like I think both of these deserve a place on there. This is not a knock on any specific model. They're both really freaking good.
Yeah.
But I will say the Edge, or not the Edge, my goodness, the Sky Paris has a little bit Sky Paris. Yeah, has a little bit more sole flaring in the forefoot. The plate's not quite as spooned out, and that toe spring isn't quite as aggressive. So it has a little bit of a flatter feel to it. For me, at slower paces, that actually felt nice and rhythmic.
Wow. Yeah.
Interesting.
However, when I started picking up the pace, now I'm the same way. I haven't had as much runs on these as I would like, but I have taken them both at race pace. So the Edge makes you feel alive. Like this thing, it's spooned out pretty hard. It's very responsive. It pushes you forward. Like this was a shoe that if I want to push the pace in, like I felt like, yes, that's it. Now I'm curious long-term, like from a marathon perspective, would I prefer the Sky in a 20-mile run or, something like that over the edge. I don't know yet. I wish I could give you that answer, but the initial impressions of responsiveness, liveliness, the toe spring's sharper, like the way the plate is. You can kind of see it in the foam too, like where that dual layer is. You can kind of see how that plate design is. It's definitely spooned out more in the edge. And
if you also look at
holding the sky,
it's okay. If you every time I've run in these, and I've done multiple runs in both of them, I always have to double check, because the only the major like eye-catching difference is either the outsole or looking in where it says edge or sky. So I keep checking, going,
the sole flaring on the medial part of the forefoot is more on the sky.
Right. The other interesting thing, just to call this out, that little paint piece in the front actually has a real thing that's indicating kind of how you're toeing off, or kind of, what was the term that was used? It was like the angle of
toe off angle.
Toe off angle, yeah. So they are different, but didn't mean to interrupt, David.
No, you're good. Yeah. And I felt like the sky kind of supinated me a little bit, oddly enough, where I felt like I was kind of getting pushed laterally.
Interesting.
I could see that.
No, yeah. So I just kind of had this weird kind of divotty feel, but I honestly don't know if I had taken that for a long run and I put it at a marathon type pace, I feel like I could really like it. And I felt that way with both shoes. And I did feel like the forefoot was a little bit more stable on the sky than the edge. But the edge felt more responsive as far as like pushing into the ground and popping off. So like it's just like they're both really good. I just got to figure out what I want them for.
Right. I think one other interesting part is the fact that these have both lost a ton of weight.
Totally.
From their previous.
That was noticeable immediately.
They're the lightest ones on the market now. Lightest true super shoes on the market.
And the other thing about it was the drop of the edge used to be 8 millimeters, but they brought it down to 5. But in my opinion, it didn't feel low. It didn't feel low because you got that earlier rocker, so you're just getting up onto it quicker. But I was so glad that neither of them felt like that sinking feeling in the heel.
No,
I couldn't enjoy them, but I can enjoy both of them now. And I likened it to, like, for me with Saucony, I really like the Pro, which has the more gradual toe spring, forefoot rocker, whereas the Elite has that later, more sharp, which is the same. You know, the Sky would be akin to the Elite, and the there's bigger differences here. Different
Sky
foams
would be
and all that
akin to the Elite.
Yes, because they have the later stage, more sharp toe spring, whereas the Edge and the Pro. Sharper. It's from a geometry standpoint, it's just not, it has a more gradual earlier starting, but I feel like you get on it quicker, which is why I think it feels propulsive in that way. And tell you, I don't know. We have more testing to do, but Matt, what was your experience? And then we're going to go into the real conversation.
So I have a little over 20 miles on both of them, and I've had the fun, which translates to me being stupid. And I'm fortunate not to have got injured, that every workout there's all workouts on these shoe, no easy runs. But every single time I've tested them, I've done a workout in one shoe in the morning, and then I've done the same workout in the other shoe in the evening, because I'm psychotic. Multiple times, by the way, with Isabella, by the way. So doing strollers, workouts there. I will say I appreciate both of them. I will say again, the Edge to me is the one that works better with my mechanics. I had the same thing where I think the way the plate is shaped really works very well with how I roll through a shoe. But oh my gosh, the foam is so much better than in the Plus. Like, it really feels great. It's noticeably light. It's way smoother. It's definitely Piba. It also smells more like Piba. Like, I don't know if anybody else does this, but I'm like you open the box and you're like, yep, that's definitely it. But the Edge, to me, the way I'm rolling works really, really well. It's not a shoe neither one are shoes that I enjoy for warming up and cooling down, like not an easy pace kind of shoe. But when you're moving, the Edge, I think, is a shoe that I would prefer for longer efforts, but I've also been able to run pretty quick in both of them. So I get more of that bounce out of the bounce and roll through the Edge, and it just rolls really nicely with my mechanics. I like the Sky, and I will say this is the first time with these shoes that these shoes have actually been comparable. And again, because they're very similar, same drop, very similar stack heights. The Edge actually has a 0.5 millimeter more, and the Sky is just a tiny bit lighter, but outside a lot of the similar pieces. previous versions weren't like that. Like the Plus, the edge was noticeably better. It was the Sky was like boring. Like I did the minimum.
Are you flipping that
in the forefoot?
What?
Because you raced the Sky, like actual races for the Sky.
That was the original. That was the original.
Gotcha.
The Sky Plus he's talking about.
The Sky and Edge Plus, I thought the Edge Plus was noticeably better. And then we go to the originals where the Edge Tokyo, I don't even think it was worth the conversation. Like it wasn't the same similar stack height. It just felt like a dud. I didn't enjoy it at all. The original Sky, though, was great. It had that bounce and that climbing out of the heel probably was what contributed to me straining my Achilles, or like my Achilles tendon in it. I also took it for a trail race, which is probably not very smart, but there's that. But yeah, it just feels like these finally got where they need to be. I will say what's interesting is the Sky takes me a second to figure out. And I feel like when I modify my mechanics, that's when it comes alive. Like me trying to run naturally, Edge all day is great. The Sky, I like just the Edge just matches. But when I can modify my mechanics and really start like elongating my stride behind me, really start slamming into the ground, like that's when the Sky comes alive. And it just takes me a little longer to figure out. So I think there's some differences in how you load the shoes. And I think certain people are going to enjoy this. And I also think they're going to enjoy it depending on the pace. Like when I'm running really fast, like going really hard, very shorter efforts, I really like the Sky for that. Like that feels better. But all those longer efforts, longer intervals. I did a 2-mile like impromptu time trial with Isabella in a stroller and ran like 10:58 in the Edge. And I was like, this is great. So longer efforts to me felt better in the Edge, but like really moving, hitting the ground hard, long stride really felt better in the Sky. So I think different strokes for different folks and how you react to them. We're going to try to give our best thing, but at the end of the day, if these are shoes you're interested in, you're going to have to try them. What?
Different strokes for different folks. We should.
I did not make that up. That's somebody's
That's
phrase.
from somewhere.
So, yeah, I don't know where, but I'm finally done.
What we're going to do with these shoes is we'll have some deeper dives into the design through our YouTube videos and stuff like I had mentioned. So keep an eye out for those. Check us out on YouTube and go to our website and we'll have more in-depth analysis of the differences because there are some distinct ways that they have different, despite how similar they look. In fact, they look so similar. Our audio engineer, BJ, made a great meme about the Office episode where Creed gets to be the manager of the office and said, corporate needs you to find the differences between these two pictures. It cuts to a talking head and she's like, they're the same picture. I think that's really funny, but they are distinct. That, right? I don't know. They're distinct. And I think they come with very different running experiences. And we're hopefully going to help people because most people don't have the privilege to be able to just, I'm going to go buy both, test them both and pick the one I like. So our hope is to really describe the running experience in each of them for all of us and try to put out some content in that way to help people make a decision.
Because just to emphasize, they do feel very different, even though they have a lot of similarities. So I think you're totally right.
Very.
We'll move on.
So what we're going to do, we're going to move forward in this conversation since we've been talking about how much we're running in different super shoes when they come in for test. We get so many questions about what should I do about training in super shoes? Should I train in them? Should I just use them for workouts? Should I just use them on race day? Should I only use them for long runs? Tons of questions in this category. So what we want to do is have a conversation about the things that we consider when people say, should I train in super shoes? So that's what we're going into now is the considerations that you should have in your head. So Matt, why don't you start us off and just start talking about some of the considerations you have or things you've been thinking about lately?
Yeah. So I don't want to take all credit for this, but this is something that's been rattling in my brain for a little bit because I've seen some comments on like YouTube and various emails that made me think about this. That when a lot of this stuff started coming out, we were very cautious. We were going, you know what, these are great tools, but we caution you not to train in these things full time. We don't know what the long-term implications are. We have some ideas about how the bodies can adapt. And that might, if you spend a lot of time in these, you might have difficulty transitioning back to other shoes if that's something you're interested in. And also because we don't know how these things affect us long-term. They're great tools, right? I'm not saying you should not use them, but it was using them all the time that we were a little bit nervous about. And that's saying that we were all using them. So what kind of made me think about that was we had somebody on YouTube comment going, I know you guys caution this, but I train full time in these, and this is the only thing I can run in without getting hurt. And it was like, okay, I understand, it's a very small sample, right? And an N of 1, right? But why would we tell someone if that's the only shoe they can run in? Why would you tell them pain not to? Right? It's like, yes, these are tools. So what we're not trying to say you shouldn't train in these. We're trying to go, there's some things you might need to think about how our bodies react to these, that you can either go, hey, that's exactly what I want, or hey, you know what? I need to think about how I'm utilizing these tools.
And just to give really brief background, I should have done this right at the beginning, but if you're following this podcast and you're newer to the running shoe world and we've been saying super shoe and you're not quite sure what that is, just to give you a brief idea, a super shoe is a shoe that has a lot of foam underneath, which we call stack height. So the amount of foam under your forefoot and your heel is usually somewhere around 40 millimeters, a lot of foam. The type of foam that's used is a blend that has really high compression and rebound to it. So it's usually what we call a PIBA-based midsole, and that's material science that we don't need to talk about today. Yeah. And then it also usually has a stiffening agent, which is usually a carbon plate. And so a lot of the super shoes are going to have those three components. They're going to have a lot of stack, which have a rockered sole, which is a curve in the forefoot. They're going to have a PIBA-based midsole most often, or properties that are very similar to that. And then they're going to have a carbon plate. So that's what a super shoe is. And we just want to continue talking about who should train in those. So thanks for that, Matt. David, what are your kind of initial thoughts with training in super shoes?
Yeah, it's a really interesting take. And I know someone personally that who's a very good runner, and they have had a relatively complex medical history where they've had multiple things go on at the foot and ankle, and I believe they've had operations. I had asked more on that, but they can't bend at the foot at that certain areas. So for them, that really stiff PIBA based midsole, that's all they can really run in. And that's what they feel comfortable in. And if you could take that dorsiflexion out of the ankle and out of the great toe and out of the toes, and you can just kind of roll with it, now they can have a running experience that isn't painful and forcing them to move through certain ranges of motion. So I think there is a time and place. And I actually, now I'm thinking about it, I know a couple other people too that have had similar experiences where if it's not a really stiff rocker, not necessarily a super shoe, but something that's really rockered, really stiff, they can't run. And usually it's people that have some kind of operation or something that's putting a lot of stiffness, whether it's a hallux rigidus or something else, through the great toe, through the ankle, whether it's an ankle fusion or something like that. Some people could really benefit from a pretty extreme design like that on a daily basis. And I think most people probably don't need to, but there are some people that could genuinely benefit from that.
Yeah. And I think I have somebody similar in my mind who's a really great runner, and they had a great toe fusion, and they from very severe OA. And even before they had the fusion, very severe osteoarthritis in that toe, which didn't allow that big toe to come up or bend up or extend. And the treatment for that traditionally in physical therapy or from a podiatrist is to put a kind of carbon shank through the big toe so that the toe doesn't have to bend. He was like, these super shoes coming out are like a lifesaver because now I can actually wear, I don't have to wear this kind of insert in the foot. I can just put my foot in the entire shoe and it's already in there for me. So it's been a game changer for them. So I think we in the past have had this conversation and we've talked about some considerations, but know that these are very real situations where the amount of mobility that you have is potentially going to be your limiting factor. And therefore these shoes are built in a way that can provide the support that you need. So that's one consideration, is mobility availability. And so if you have limited mobility in certain joints, these types of shoes can be an aid for you to be able to run, period. That's not most people. So if we take that and we put it to the side, what other considerations, Matt, do you have in your mind when it comes to what are the implications of training in super shoes?
So before we go any farther, so what I'm hearing is a lot of things about like the joint mechanics in terms of how much range of motion is available. What would be the difference for you two before I go forward in terms of why would they do well? Why a super shoe versus just a stiffer very rocker shoe, like training shoe? What would be the difference in thought process there?
For me, it's the same. I think people have done really well with the endorphin shift, but that's kind of going away. People have also done well in the Glide Ride 3, but that has some toe spring in it. So the toe spring in the Glide Ride 3 has prohibited some people. I don't think there's a difference. I think it's just hard to get a stiff enough shoe that doesn't have carbon in it. So for me, that's the problem. Is there, and I don't think it's worth creating a training shoe with a carbon plate in it just for
even though there's
a
few of them. Yeah.
Yes.
And we don't know
usually those aren't even stiff ones. Usually those are flexible ones. So I think that's why it's you need a stiff enough agent to make it worth it.
So
do you have any thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, I mean, no, I echo you completely. One that I've seen that works pretty well too. Like if it doesn't have to be quite that stiff, the Cloud Monster has worked for a couple people. High stack, rocker, relatively stiff, has a tiny bit more flexibility through the forefoot, but that has worked for someone that I know that has a fusion through the
So my thought process, so thank you for that. So my thought process on this comes from a training perspective. When it comes to treating pathology and going, how do we ensure someone can run? No, I'm not, by the way. This is just by OCD, finding something to mess with and
I'm hearing this crinkling noise in the background. Sorry. I'm like, Matt, are you opening a granola bar or something?
That does happen. I'm hungry.
You have done that before. That's why
I know. No, it's just me. My hands trying to find something to mess with because I can't. You two, I don't know, Nathan. When you're with me
for nervous, Matt.
No, it's not that. It's just this is just my normal, just normal.
I fidget a lot.
Yeah. I don't. Nathan,
when I think a lot, my thumbs bleed because I just pick at my thumbs.
Yeah,
that's my tick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
got
sorry,
a few of them.
What's my thing? Do I have a thing?
I don't know.
No, you're just normal. You're
just a normal person. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nathan,
cool.
have you ever seen me plastic water bottles, the disposable ones?
Oh, I do that. I do this.
I will. You do that. Actually,
I do that. That's a thing. Oh my gosh.
I will destroy a water bottle. I will rip off the paper label and make sure I get every little piece, and then I will just destroy it and rip it it's terrible.
So this is going to become a psychology session.
Everybody's seen me chew on my freaking fingers every episode because I'm
unqualified, not licensed.
Before we move forward, there's a good chance that BJ, our audio engineer, will just take out that background noise, so no one will even know what we're talking about. But there was a crinkling noise for David and I for probably 5 minutes, and I just was like, "This needs to stop." Not getting so annoyed. There it is. He's showing it. Okay, so let's go forward. We talked about the consideration.
Annoyed. I was fine. Nate was annoyed.
I was annoyed. I was like, "This is driving me crazy." So we talked about mobility. I think another consideration for me is long-term adaptations. So when we use, there's evidence when we look at minimalist footwear that there is changes in muscle hypertrophy and bone density when there's long-term use of minimalist footwear. And that's over a long period of time. And I think the consideration is that these super shoes decrease the demand on certain areas of the body. And so if you have decreased demand, assuming training stays the same, therefore you're going to have decreased response from the parts of the body that have less demand. And so then if you are going from these super shoes, you're training them every single day, and then you're like, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to buy a Brooks Ghost and start training in that again. Is your body, after long-term adaptations, maybe 6 to 12 months worth of adaptation, is your body going to be handled just randomly switching back to a traditional trainer? So I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong, inherently wrong with training full-time in super shoes. I think that the consideration needs to be, if I do that, what would I need to be considerate of if I try to go out or wean away from it? I think that you just need to be thoughtful about the changes that could happen long-term. We know that tendon modeling and regeneration happens over 9 months. And so if you're training full time in something, your body is going to adapt to the stimulus underneath it. We don't have studies to show this yet. Those sort of longitudinal studies have not happened. But I think that's one of the considerations in my head. There is one that we are going to talk about today.
There's one we're talking about. There are actually several out there underway right now, but these are like long, like 6-12 month type studies. So it'll be a while before they come out. And again, a lot of them are being done by footwear companies. So they may never come out. So we'll see. But yeah, David, go for it.
What do you consider training?
So I think we're talking about training full time. Like that's all you do, correct? Or just in general?
No, I'm just saying like how should you use them in your training? What I was just talking about when I said training is if you choose to 100% of the time run in super shoes, think about the long-term adaptations.
Workouts,
easy days, workouts, races, long runs, everything.
Yeah, everything. Yes. Yeah. I think that the way a lot of people are using them right now is more appropriate. Like for, I think most of us, like we're gonna probably use them for workouts. So it makes sense when you're trying to run fast, and then you're gonna use a non-super shoe on easy days. I think that makes sense. If you're gonna do
shoes like the SC Trainer and the Super Blast come into this?
That's a great. Again, I think that's what muddles the conversation. I think technically by a lot of the consideration, even though the weight isn't there, it's got some of the same properties there. So I think this is less of a conversation now than it was then, because we're seeing so many of the same elements that were considered super start to seep into trainers. Like even a classic shoe like the Vomero
I think
has
we're
a top layer of Zoom X now. So that's why this is more complicated. And I think the transition, Nathan's always said this the best. You're the one who really originally said, there's not really each type of shoe is going to have its own benefits and risks. The thing you got to be cautious with is your body will adapt if you spend all the time in this shoe. And that's not necessarily the issue. It's if you suddenly try to transition to something different, just like if you try to go from a normal shoe to a minimalist shoe, that's a little shock. There is some risk factors to that. So you have to be, if you want to change back, it might take some time, and how long that might take, we don't know, because we know super shoes, your mechanics change, the softer shoes, the plates, you start loading things differently. You have forces that go into different areas than they were before. We know softer shoes like this that are more compliant, like that, you tend to stiffen your mechanics up, and you may not everyone, you may not go through as much joint excursion. And so you may not shock absorb as well as you would in something like a traditional trainer or a minimalist shoe. Like it's going to be different. It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's just going to be different. So you have to take those things into consideration. But now that we're starting to see the super technology go into daily trainers, this might not be as big of a thing, but it's, from a performance standpoint, for me, I would want to do my normal easy runs where speed's not a focus in a normal shoe. And then when I need to run fast, use the shoe that's designated for faster stuff. But that's also, if you're going to do a longer race and you want to do your longer race in this type of shoe, you need to use it in your long runs to prepare your body to tolerate that. So I think it's just making sure your adaptations are in the right place, and knowing that the more you use it, the more you adapt to it, which can either be good, or it might be something that's a little challenging if you're trying to also maybe run in something else. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other, I think some of the challenges, David, go for it. I've talked for long enough.
No, you're good. I completely agree. I think it's kind of getting what I wanted to get at. And I think we're at a revolution of technology right now where we have all these new materials that are becoming at crazy rates of abundance now, where we can start putting them in these mass produced shoes that are in training shoes. And I think the range of, let's say, compliance, cushioning, responsiveness, yada, 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 weight, I think that extreme is getting larger and larger towards that end.
Yeah.
But those shoes, like you said, that are this more kind of minimalist, natural feeling, low stack, EVA, whatever, like those shoes still exist. And so that range has gotten bigger. And so I think there just needs to be a little bit more caution if you are changing footwear, to just take the proper precautions and almost like if you had a stress fracture or something and you were waning out of a boot to a regular shoe, like you almost have to take that same approach because these shoes are so wildly different.
Right. It's such an extreme that I think what we're cautioning from is
where
there are
neither
some people
is bad per se.
Right.
It's just you have to make sure that if you are changing, that you take the necessary steps to make a fluid change.
Yeah.
And I think when we say changing too, there's nothing wrong with incorporating both in your life all the time.
Totally.
Either. What we mean is
that's best,
if you're living one camp for a year, and then you can't just switch to another camp right away. You got to wean your way there.
Yeah.
But if you're just always in both, then your body's going to adapt to the stresses that you put on it. That's just how our bodies work.
And I think that's best. The problem is we also understand that not everybody has the resources to do that. Like, we are very lucky that we get such a variety. But if you have some of the resources, I'm going to really encourage you again to think about having a little variety. Like, for me, you know, what I walk around in most of the day is a pair of zeros, right? A minimal zero drop shoe, because it helps me to keep some of the adaptations I want in terms of intrinsic foot mass, in terms of like just some of that ankle range of motion that I like to maintain. Because I notice when I spend a lot of time in super shoes or higher stack shoes, things are a little more difficult when I try to get back in a more minimal shoe. So I like to maintain that. You know, I have, you know, some like lighter shoes that I like to be able to use that are close to the ground, because I feel like it keeps my capacity to be able to transition to other shoes quicker. Like, I think because of that, I can easily transition into ultra shoes now, because I've spent so much time in zero drop shoes that my Achilles and calf, and plus the amount of strength work that I do for the calf as well, I can transition between these easier. Whereas in the past, when we got sent ultra or something like that, I'm like, oh gosh, it's going to take me like 2 to 3 weeks just to transition to getting to running in them. I just have to walk in them, and then I'm going to be, even that, I'm going to be sore. So I think it's that variation, which we know from an injury reduction prevention standpoint, one of the very few things is if you're training in a variety of things, that tends to be best. I think because you're adapted to a couple things rather than just being in one extreme. But we also realize there are some people who they can only handle that extreme. And we don't want you to think that we're saying, oh, you shouldn't do this, it's bad for you. It's just, you should do what helps you do what you want to do. But you should also recognize that in all extremes, there are benefits and risks. In the minimal stuff, we know there's a higher risk of Achilles type issues, of stress fractures, bone related injuries, things like that, because that's where there's more stress. We don't have very good evidence, but I will say clinically, in a lot of the super shoes, you have a lot more hip things, right? A lot more hamstring, a lot more hip, like deep rotator stuff, because a lot of the stresses get placed back up to stabilizing in the hip. Now, we need some research on that, and the actual research might come out a little different, because there were some case studies saying there's more navicular stress fractures, which might just be because they're a little bit less, they're more compliant, resilient.
They were thinking it was plate design, but I think we talked to our episode with Dr. Rich Willey, who I respect a lot. He kind of talks about, I forget if it was in the episode or if it was in a pre or post conversation. He talked about that study a bit, and he actually thought about writing a precautionary rebuttal to that. So
it was
there's a lot to be taken, because it was just a case series of 5 people. So anyway, I think
in a
so.
Very
we've talked about
unique group. Yeah,
we've talked about a couple considerations. Consideration 1 is, what are your mobility situations? If you're super limited, maybe super shoes, these ones with these stiff rockered, are going to help you just be able to run without pain.
Or
consideration
super
number
trainers.
2 is going to be this consideration of, long-term adaptations. And so how should you move towards one or the other if you've been in one camp for so long exclusively? I think another consideration is, what's the best option? And this is a little bit out of our wheelhouse, but something that we understand a bit, is what is the best thing to train in to create the best performance later on? And so there was a study that just came out from Justin Matisse. I wish I knew. Do you know how to pronounce his last name correctly?
That was Matthias, but
Matthias.
Justin, we appreciate it.
I'm
Good
so
luck,
sorry,
by the way.
Justin.
He's defending his master's thesis, by the way. Either by this time this comes out, he will have defended already. So we want to say good luck, by the way.
Good luck. So in his study, he took a very small group of people. It was a pilot study, but took one group and had them do all of their high intensity training in more traditional racing flats. It was the Nike waffle. And then in the other group, they trained those high intensity workouts in the Vaporfly. He basically found, from a running economy standpoint, over 8 weeks, so small sample size, short period of time, that the group who trained in the Vaporflies had an immediate reduction or improvement in running economy because of the shoes, which we know from previous studies. But the people who had the most improvement in running economy over the 8 weeks were the 2 people who trained in the more traditional flat. The philosophy behind that is, you both do the same workout, then you're both going, then the one who's running with the shoe that's not giving you the boost, they have to, their body had to work harder and their body had to respond to a higher stimulus. So the question then is,
they had more delayed onset muscle soreness too, which also kind of makes sense with some of the comments that some of the super shoes decrease that. It may just be, there may not be as much tissue damage, but that's an extrapolation. We don't know that because they didn't exactly test and do a biopsy. So.
Right. Yeah. And so the question there is, should you train in these super shoes for your workouts just because they feel better and they give you that improvement? Or is it more beneficial to get a higher physiological stimulus from a flat? So I think that there's lots of debate to have here. So what are your thoughts on this, David? What do you think?
David's a good person to start with this, by the way. We've had this conversation. You have good thoughts on this. I like it.
I think it's a very fair question, but I think there's a common saying, practice like you play.
Yep.
I think in order to know how it's going to respond to your foot on race day, you do have to wear it at some point, right? You can't just put it on. So I think there's a balance. I think if you're in a building block and you're wearing these more traditional flats and kind of building your legs up, great. Then maybe you're 4 weeks out or something from the race that you really want to do well in, and you start kind of fine tuning in the other shoe. That's probably the way that I would go about it.
Yep.
With that said, I want to kind of flip the question on you too from a training volume standpoint, because did my mic just do that?
You're good.
No? Okay. I had a weird thing in my headset. That was strange. Sorry about that. If you're listening to this, and that was really weird. Training volume. There we go. Okay.
Yes.
Train of thoughts back. Because I was thinking about this also, not necessarily from a race performance standpoint, but also from a volume standpoint. And let's say if someone's running over 100 miles a week, they are on their feet a crap ton. What do you think that there is some benefit to putting these shoes on for the sheer sake of getting volume in and being able to recover from some of these efforts? Because race distance is one thing, right? Like that could be 5K to marathon. That like a 5K is what, 15 minutes? Like it depends, anywhere from 12 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on the person, right? Like, that's not very long in comparison to what a marathon can put on your legs. And so I think, yes, you have to have a balance of both between the flats and the performance shoes, but I think it also depends also on what are you training for and what are you trying to do?
Huge point, because the study that this was done in is cross country in college, collegiate runners, so 10K and 6K. So it's one of those or track. And so I think that's a huge consideration. And in this study, the people who ran in the Vaporflies didn't alter their training differently than the people who ran in the flats. And, if we take off our injury prevention hat and just put on our hat of getting as much workouts in as possible that your body can handle, if you can handle more workouts in a Vaporfly versus a flat, that allows you to add to that stimulus so that you could actually achieve the same running economy benefits, but you'd get to train in those super shoes, get a little bit more in. I liken that, an analogy that might be...
I wish I went into more depth on this. Do we know their performance metric? It was time, like 8K, 10K?
No, it was
economy.
They did it off of the running economy testing, which is a whole other part of the conversation because it's maximal.
Because if you're talking about collegiate cross country, I wish I read this study more in depth. I apologize. I'm going to just front that there. A lot of these kids are racing in cross country spikes. So if you're working out in Vaporflies and then you take 3 ounces, 3 ounces off your shoe, and then you go, if you're used to racing out in flats and you go to spikes on grass, you're probably going to translate a little bit easier than someone who's working out in Vaporflies and translating down to something that's a little bit more flexible and a little bit lower to the ground and more aggressive from a geometry standpoint. So it depends on where you are too. On the West Coast, some of the courses aren't all grass and it just depends on location, what the course looks like. I think cross country is that is a very hard thing to test because cross country looks different wherever you are across this country.
I will say on the West Coast, you go to cross country. I see almost in high school, almost nobody's wearing flats or spikes anymore. It's like all Vaporflies, which I would not do.
You could make the case for collegiate too.
I haven't seen the collegiates as much, but
almost all collegiate cross country courses, people are mostly wearing Vaporflies on the we'll.
Yeah,
crazy.
We don't have as crazy courses here, but
yeah.
So
can I add something to this?
Can I finish my quick thought and then we'll
go for it?
So when we were thinking about that idea of if you can tolerate more and you're having less fatigue through those muscles, you can maybe add some volume. Another way to think about that, which is more obvious, is through like a Alter G treadmill or through like a bungee system like lever, where I could, if I put the lever on me on my treadmill, which is like a bungee system which offloads you, I could run 6-minute miles for 6 miles. And it would obviously be easier for me to do because I'm getting a performance benefit of being able to do that on the treadmill, but I don't get the response in my body. So to be able to get the same physiological response, you have to do overspeed training when you're doing offloaded running, which means you're running at like 15 miles an hour to get the, like literally they've done studies on overspeed training with like offloaded stuff. In the same way, if you want to get the same like physiological running economy improvement while wearing super shoes, from this study, it would suggest that you're going to have to train harder. You just have to train harder, and the shoes allow you to do that. And so you just got to match from a just strictly performance. You just got to match your intensity with what your shoes are allowing you to do.
Right. I will say that since a lot of these have become more popular, one of the things that because of the time limitations that I have at the moment with the amount of work I've got with a little one, that I've been doing more double workouts. So people talk about double thresholds. I'm like, I've been doing those for a bit. I would have never been able to do that in traditional flat traditional trainers. Like I would have been wrecked, especially with the length of some of the workouts that I used to do, but I don't do that. So like I'll do a 3-4 mile tempo in the morning now, and then a 3-4 mile tempo in the evening, and I can get away with that. And so, yeah, there might be more benefits. I'm seeing some pretty cool improvements. How long that takes, I don't know. But the other thing I will say is David made a good point, is you gotta prep your body eventually for what you're going to be using and racing in. That's why, I've told people, hey, if you're going to go run in the Vaporfly for your marathon, you better make sure you can make it through a long run with the Vaporfly, because just because you can make it through 10 miles doesn't mean you can make it through 26.2. So you have to learn to, can I handle this shoe for this long? And then you also have to adapt to it. It's not going to magically give you speed. You have to learn to use these tools. The interesting part about the study, and hopefully I remember this correctly, and this wasn't just a private conversation with Justin, was that a lot the runners who used the Vaporflies had bigger, because I think they crossed it over. I'm thinking about a different study he did that maybe he didn't.
Yeah,
sure, but did a different study where they were looking at, so they did this stuff, and then they had both groups where both the flat situation as well as the Vaporfly, and the groups that had trained in the Vaporfly had a greater response and improvement over time to the Vaporfly compared to the ones that weren't training in it, because they got used to it. So you improve more in the thing that you train in. However, the groups in the flat had more of a response to that and an overall greater response. But you asked a great question. Were they really doing the same tolerable volume and getting enough stimulus?
Right.
I don't know. This is a study with eight subjects. So it's fairly small, more pilot-ish, but it does give some interesting thoughts to go, you can do more, but you might have some changes in some of the stuff. Because they also looked at jump height and things like that, counter movement, jump, and adaptation. The ones who used the flats obviously had better improvement because you're actively having to use more of those mechanics. You're not going to have to do that as much in a super shoe. So,
and I think the studies, the main aims of the study were to look at a lot of different longer term changes. And I think, there weren't a lot of changes seen in some of the biomechanical and non-running economy parts, but I just think that part of it's because 8 weeks might not be long enough. As we know, it takes a lot longer for tissues to adapt. So you might not see those things right away, but it's fun to see a pilot study like this come out and just kind of go that way. Right. So what we're going to do, we have definitely hit a lot of stuff here, but there are way more considerations. So if you're thinking in your head, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? Because there are a million what ifs when it comes to how should we utilize super shoes. I would say just to kind of move us forward, one of the things is most people are probably using this in a way where you don't have $1 million expendable income to just keep replacing super shoes. Probably the wisest way to use a super shoe is to use it judiciously, use it to acclimate to its use for the distance that you're going to use it for, and otherwise do all of your other training in daily trainers. And if you have, so then you'd have 2 pairs of shoes, your daily kind of do it all trainer, and then your race shoe that you use for one long run or one workout just to get used to it during your training block. Or if you have a couple different options, then you could have kind of rotate between those other two, but save that very expensive shoe for just kind of those main workouts. So what we're going to do is push ourselves into the final part of this conversation, which is talking about calf strains. And so we've just gotten a lot of questions about different types of calf strains. What should you do and how should you manage calf strains? And it's honestly a pretty tricky thing because it's tricky for us to talk about here because there are a lot of things anatomically that could be going on that could be both leading to your calf strain and the actual structure that's the problem. Yes. When it comes to a calf strain. So what we're going to do for this final segment of the episode is kind of give you a breakdown of the anatomy of the calf, what sort of structures are there, and what can feel like a calf strain, and just make sure that those are in your consideration. And then just give some thoughts on general timeline. But ultimately, our recommendation, as always, is if you're having some sort of pain or injury that's preventing you from doing your running, find a good running PT and have them kind of be part of your care and help you figure out what's going on. Before we jump into this, we have something pretty exciting actually attached to this episode. Our friends at Running Warehouse have given us 8 $100 gift cards to give away. So for the next 8 episodes, we are going to be giving away a $100 gift card from Running Warehouse. And so what you need to do to enter that giveaway is to go over to, after you subscribe, if you're on podcast or if you're on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and leave a review. After you've done that, jump over to our YouTube page and comment that you want to enter the giveaway and answer the subjective. So if you are a faithful listener, you've heard this special announcement about the $100 gift card giveaway from Running Warehouse, and you can enter by making sure you're following and subscribed and you've left a review for the podcast, but then go over to YouTube and comment on the video, and that will enter you into the giveaway. So if you've made it this far in the episode, congratulations, you heard that announcement. All right, Matt, now I'm going to kick it to you. We're talking about calf strains. Give us an overview of the anatomy of the calf and some different structures that can be involved with creating calf pain. And we're not talking about Achilles strains. We're talking about the calf.
Specifically
so go ahead.
So the calf is primarily, it's obviously one of the major, and it's actually one of the most important muscles for running in terms of both propulsion as well as support, meaning when you are landing on the ground, when your foot's on the ground, that is a primary muscle that's holding you up and supporting you from collapsing, specifically your ankle. It's also a muscle that's really important for helping generate some of the propulsive forces that move you forwards as that thing gets under and behind you. So it's the very important muscle, primary muscle, right, for propulsion and moving forwards. Okay. Now, there are 3 primary muscles that make up this. Okay. There's some debate. Not everybody has one of the extra ones in there, but it's split up into the gastrocnemius, which has 2 different heads. Okay. That's usually when you see some of the people with the really bulked up calf muscle, and you see like the 2 separate parts at the very, very top. That's the gastrocnemius, right? What's very unique about that is one of the few calf muscles that actually also crosses the knee joint. So that will come into play in just a second. Okay. Behind that, you have one of the deeper, more kind of endurance-based calf muscles, which is the soleus. This is one of the larger ones. It runs from the kind of the top of the tibia and goes all the way down to the Achilles. Just the gastrocnemius also goes to the tibia, but this sits a little farther back there. There is also another one called your plantaris, which is a small string-like muscle that sits on top of all these. Some people have it, some people don't. The reason I bring this up is I actually have seen some people with plantaris tears who thought this was a calf issue. Technically it is, but couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was honestly lost early in my career until I was like, that's weird. Like I didn't take the time to palpate this correctly. That's something that needs to get checked out. Sure enough, diagnostic ultrasound later, like, oh yeah, it's a plantaris tear. So those are the 3 primary muscles involved with calf strains. Some other tissues that you might need to think about. You do have a couple nerves, a primary one called your sural nerve that runs right through this area. Not uncommon for this to seem like muscle strain and actually be nerve-related issue as well. The posterior tibialis and a couple of your other toe flexors also sit even deeper. to the soleus and can also be things that get irritated and can also look like calf strains. So just, you got your calf, but no, I know I say this a lot. My students can make fun of me, but this area is high density real estate. There's a lot of stuff in that area, which is why sometimes if it's recurrent, it may be a good idea to seek out some professional help to help you dive a little deeper. But those are the primary things in that area.
Yeah, I think one of the things. No, I think that hits a lot of the anatomy. There's also the tibial nerve, which is a little bit bigger and comes down. So that'd be the other nerve. And the sural nerve. The sural nerve can have a referral of symptoms more to the outside or lateral side of the foot, whereas the tibial nerve will come more down to the arch of the foot if you're getting like referred symptoms from those nerves. What I would say from an etiology perspective, or like when people start to like tell me their stories about how this pain started and what it feels like, I think oftentimes part of people's stories when it comes to a more extreme calf strain that's keeping them from running is they first said, I don't know, for like the past year or 6 months or a couple years, I felt like my calves had just been so tight. And they just say that like this tightness in my calves, it was tight. And then it just started getting worse and worse until it was painful and then sharp and I couldn't run on it. And we've talked about this with a number of different muscles and injuries before, but when you feel like you have tightness in a muscle, it's possible that it's truly tight. But a lot of times when you experience tightness sensations as a runner, it's actually due to fatigue and potentially some early starts of micro tearing in that muscle. And so it's really important to distinguish whether you have true tightness or if your tightness sensation is due to fatigue or due to some sort of early micro tears. And so the important difference there is if it is a lack of endurance of that muscle or power generation or weakness that's leading to this fatigue, the treatment strategy is to strengthen and create muscle endurance and muscle power. Whereas if it's truly a tight muscle, your treatment would be to stretch. So understanding which one it is brings you in two totally different directions. At home, an easy way that you could test this is to, if you want to test muscle endurance, you can put on a metronome to 60 beats per second, stand on one foot, and see how many you can do to the beat of the metronome. So if it's
heel raises,
you would go up, down, and do it as many times as you can until you are completely fatigued without using your hands to support you, and just see if there's a big difference side to side. I would say you need to get at least 25, if not more than 30 as an endurance runner. The thing you could do to test the length of those muscles and of your ankle joint would be to do what I call a standing lunge test. And so you can go close to a wall, put your heel down flat on the floor and bring your knee all the way to the wall. If you can touch your knee to the wall with your heel staying down, slide your toes back until that heel starts to come up before your knee touches the wall. Then measure the distance between your toe and the wall. You should be able to get about 9 centimeters away. So that could help you understand, is this due to some sort of limitation in my ankle joint, potentially in the calf, or is this due to some sort of weakness? What were you going to say, Matt?
So for the reliability with the heel raise test, by the way, for endurance, it is very important that you maintain the same height. Technically, the test is over if you can no longer achieve the same height. So just a heads up, because a lot of people do these little like ankle pumps at the end, like, no, you're done. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, full range of motion. I forget what there's a standard of like a certain amount.
50% of your max height. What I do clinically is I put them up on a box and I bring a tape measure down, measure their max height, and then I wait till they can't reach 50% of that height, and then I terminate the test. At home, it's just harder to do that. So you just you gotta be honest with yourself and notice that you're dropping down. So it's or you could have your, you know, friend or spouse or whatever, you know, set it up for you. It's not super difficult.
Yep.
So David, do you have any thoughts on kind of what people express when they're feeling calf strains or calf pain and things that you consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys hit it pretty well. Taking a look at how it started, how long it's been there, what flares it up. Sometimes it's like, oh, like all my daily mileage is fine. My volume is fine. But for some reason, every time I go to the track, it hurts. Well, now we might have a power issue. Maybe you don't have enough eccentric control to actually pop off of the foot and ankle. I think just like you said earlier, just listening to what's causing it. You know, is it a length issue? Is it a power issue? Is it an endurance issue? Because runners, even though we consider this as an endurance sport, it's so multifaceted. I mean, the amount of power that goes into each step, we kind of take that for granted. I mean, it's a bunch of single leg jumps over and over and over again. You know, it's like a lot of times people make the analogy of controlled falling, and it's like no one really likes to fall, right? Like, so it's like you're having to just constantly catch yourself and push off. So I think just getting a proper history and like you said, you use the words being honest with yourself. I think a lot of times people intuitively kind of know sometimes. Even the ones that are the most confused, they'll be like, I don't know. It just feels like if I do this, this might make it feel better. Or like every time I do this, it just seems like it gets angry, you know? And so it's like, oh, if I run longer than an hour, okay, maybe we have an endurance issue. Maybe like, you know, I think a lot of times in the storytelling of what the symptoms are is where we can kind of see what the issue is, even before even touching the person and evaluating. Right. So I think just a lot of honesty with the history and what's going on. And I think a lot of times people kind of need to put their pride aside, because I think a lot of people are like, well, I run all the time. Of course my calves are strong. And it's like, that's not necessarily the case.
No, exactly.
You know, more often than not, that's not the case. And so that goes for the whole leg. They're like, I run all the time. My legs are strong. Like, why would I need to do any strength training? It's like, that's like, no.
Not how it works. Not how it works.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Yeah. Just having an honest conversation with yourself and really listening to what you're feeling. Because it's like, if you notice a pattern to what's happening, the chances are that pattern is telling a story.
I will say, I know I probably said this 1,000 times, but just because you run does not mean you are strong or have power. Running is, yes, you do need to have a certain amount to run, but it doesn't necessarily build more of that. If you want to build more of that, you have to do things specific to those activities. So the concept called the specificity of training principle. But,
The other consideration with calf strains is how long can I expect this to take to get better? And honestly, a big part of that's going to depend on the severity of the strain and which structure is involved.
Yes.
I would say anecdotally, the most finicky ones have been soleus strains. If somebody has a soleus strain, a lot of times it ends up hurting with walking too, because it's just such a foundational muscle for postural control. And so it does so much work to control the advancement of your shin bone as you're walking. And then obviously as you're running, it's even higher. It's just constantly working. And so in those cases, a lot of times these are strains that take a little bit more of a conservative approach. You might need more time off with this than you do with a lot of other types of even Achilles tendinopathy, plantar fascia pain. Sometimes these need a little bit more time of offloading and allowing it to recover than others. I would say the longest that I've seen people, no, not the longest. To get through the early healing phase when you have like one that's hurting while walking is criterion and time-based. A lot of times the time component is going to be like 1 to 3 weeks off completely of running. And then the criterion is that no pain with walking and pretty much no pain with running. And so, and when I say pretty much no pain, I would say that when you're going back, the pain during, after, and the day after should be no more than a dull ache, maybe like a 3 or 2 out of 10, even lower than I give people for Achilles tendinopathy or patellar tendinopathy. I give them a little more leeway. When it comes to these muscle issues, let that thing heal and then start to load it appropriately. So that's kind of how I approach that. It's going to take time. And it's easier to set them back, because if you just do one thing too fast, and that speed is a huge thing, but if you do one thing too fast, it can just reset the process a lot easier than some other conditions. But anything for y'all that you want to add to that?
Yeah, the soleus is definitely challenging because it's such an important running muscle and walking muscle. Like, they've looked at a lot of studies. One of the things that as you become more experienced as a runner, one of the things that actually changes most is your soleus, because you utilize it so much. It's not only during like endurance running, but also during walking. So it's incredibly important. And like Nathan said, what the goal, depending on the severity, the goal is to get that tissue ready to start rehabbing. And if you keep irritating it, just because the people think, oh, I have this natural healing timeline, it's just heal in 8 weeks. You can reset that, right? You can re-injure things. And the soleus, because you use it so much, it's so important. You sometimes, to make sure you're working with your healthcare professional on this, but sometimes you just got to be a little extra conservative, because the more you use something, the more care you got to take when you start it as to when you return to that activity. And not only when you return to that activity, when you return to doing it, quote unquote, normally, right? So that just because of the capacity that it needs.
Yeah. It's a pretty highly involved muscle.
It's a highly involved muscle. I will also say one of the things clinically I've noticed, because I definitely in early in my career struggled with these, because they, like Nathan David said, they're so important. Sometimes you need a more conservative approach with the more extreme ones. Sometimes, you pull it and it's a very minor strain. It's like, all right, let's just ease into this, maybe avoid some speed work, and then you're fine, right? More severe cases, we start thinking about, hey, is there like a tear there that needs to heal, some more serious stuff? Might have to take more time off. I will say one of the things that I struggle with most is a lot of the runners that got back to running at normal paces, and like, I can't push past, and David mentioned this, I can't do my speed work. Like, I keep trying, and that's where I irritate it. And one of the things I will say is running, like I said, running by itself does not build higher levels of strength and power. And so what I had to learn is to really make sure people had covered all the bases, is you got to be, when your tissue's ready, not early, but when it's ready, if you want to get back to speed work, you got to start thinking about some single leg hopping, some like adding additional weight, especially to make sure you've improved the capacity, but doing things that require true power, which power is force and how quickly you're generating that force. So force over time. So just normal speed stuff may not be enough to get your body ready for when you want to run quicker on the track. And so if that's something you want and you're struggling to get that last little bit, you might need to think about some things like hopping or things in that nature, or even some, you can still use strides if you slowly prep that. That can also be an exercise in and of itself, but you have to prepare. If you want to run faster, you have to make sure your body has the capacity to do what you're asking of it. And that's just a piece that I was missing as a clinician. I was like, oh, we need to work on this. So
we got to work on power.
You got to work on power.
Well, thank you everybody for sticking with us. Like I said, we had a very jam-packed show talking about, I guess, apparel for 10 minutes. Still sorry about that. But then moving into talking about some new super shoes coming out, are some of the considerations of many more to talk about what it means to train well in super shoes, and then talking a bit about calf injuries and calf strains and some of the considerations for rehab. These are ones I really think having a really running specific healthcare provider involved in your care is really helpful. Runcare.org, if you haven't heard about it, they have a list of providers that they've vetted who work with runners regularly. So you can check out their map on their website. But otherwise, we just hope that if you are having any issues with pain, that you can find somebody that you can trust and that understands running. It's a real gift to have that person in your corner when things come up. So thank you all for following along with us. Check out everything that we've got going on our website, Instagram, on YouTube, all that stuff. You can just search us at Doctors of Running, and we'll talk to you all next time.